So many systems, even in the proportional representation, um, you're still voting for a party, or you're voting for a person, and then the votes for that person also control how much influence that party gets. And I was wondering, could we remove the party element? Could we create a system that you vote for a person, not a party, and the person um, gets a certain amount of power within your parliament based off of the votes they personally get. Um, no party involved. And so they would probably, like, you'd also have to set it up so that they would get funding based off their like how many votes they got, what their representation was within the legislature. That way, like, they could hire a team to run, like, to do all the legislative stuff, um, because, like, a lot of things are split amongst parties, and so you'd still have to create a team to do that, and in a way that's party like, but that is all dependent on the person you voted for rather than the party. um, and so there, in that way, uh, when, like, that person leaves politics, it's not like the party just changes and picks another person. It's a whole new person you're voting for. So let's have a look here. Question: I like the single transferable vote system, but is there a way to remove the party element entirely? Is there a way for you to have a system where you vote for an individual, and then that individual has that power within the legislature based on the percentage of their vote? What would a system like this look like? You got to cut out my ahs and ahs. Yes, there is a name for exactly what you're describing, and it's a real idea in voting theory. You've basically reinvented a family of systems that strips the party out completely and makes the individual the unit of power. That's what I like. The purest version of your idea is weighted or proxy representation. The mechanic is simple. Every voter picks one individual, anyone willing to serve. Every candidate who receives votes takes a seat in the legislature. I mean, if you get enough votes to represent a seat, like, I would say you still have your voting system. Like, what was it called again? The single transferable vote system, where you're like picking people, and your vote is counted towards the first one on the list that has gotten enough votes to get a seat within your legislature. I have to update what I'm talking about. Just give me a second. Kick. Oh, someone did a chat that I missed. Oh, they're just telling me about viewers. Oh, go here if you want more viewers. Here we go. That should be everything. Let's continue. Where were we? But instead of one person, one vote. Okay. Anyone willing to serve? Every candidate who receives votes take a seat in the legislature. But instead of one person, one vote on the floor, each legislator casts a weighted vote equal to the number of citizens who chose them. Yes, but as I said, you need a certain number of chosen citizens, and you have, like, the multiple voting system where you get to vote, put your most preferred candidate. If they don't get enough votes, like, you'd have a bar set, like, you need 0.3% of total votes to get a seat and to be in the room. And if you don't get that, then that one's crossed out and they choose your second one. If they don't get the limit, then they choose the third one. Most people would vote for someone who would get enough votes, and so most people just have to write one name, but you'd still have that there for the representation. And that encourages people to try and vote for someone. Like, you could vote for the person you want most to get in there, and then you can just back it up with someone you know will get in. So someone who won 80k votes carries 8 times the legislative power of someone who won 10k votes. I mean, with how many millions of people there are in our country, probably got to get, I don't know, like 20, 30k to even make it there. But obviously that's something you'd figure out when you're making the system. There are no districts, no party lists, no seat allocation formulas. Proportionality isn't computed at all. It just is, because each person literally holds the votes that were given to them. That's the elegant part. It's the most direct possible mapping from how many people wanted this person to how much say this person has. The problem you immediately run into is the same as the same one single transferable vote solves with transfers, and it's worth sitting with because it's the crux of the design. If you vote for your neighbor and she only gets 300 votes, what happens to your vote? Okay, so this is something I've already talked about. In the native version, she takes a seat with trivial weight, and your legislator has tens of thousands of near powerless members. This is what you want to avoid. Yes. Physically unworkable. So almost every serious version of this idea adds a transfer step, and that gives you the most famous named variant. Ooh. Asset voting. Okay. So it tells me I want to save that name. Asset voting. This was first floated by Lewis Carroll, the Alice author, who was a mathematician in the 1880s and revived by voting theorists in the 2000s. You vote for one individual, then the candidate themselves become the holder of those votes. They're assets. The candidates below the threshold to hold a seat can donate or negotiate their accumulated votes to others. Your neighbor with 300 votes can hand them to a candidate she trusts, who then crosses the quota. So no votes is wasted. So my idea was a variation of this, right? Like the single transferable vote system where you pick multiple people. You would pick multiple people, and the first one to cross the threshold of representation, like probably 20, 30,000 votes. I mean, again, I'm not doing math here for it. So you'd find the threshold set to get you what you think is a proper number of people in Parliament. You'd set that threshold, and you pick your list, and the highest one on your list that crosses that threshold, that is where your vote goes. And so there's none of this vote giving stuff. But you can pick basically anyone, but you want to have someone you know will cross the threshold somewhere on your list. So no vote is wasted. It stays under the control of the person you chose, who acts as your agent. The legislator consolidates down to a workable size. It's single transferable vote, where the transfers are done by the candidates deliberately rather than by a mechanical preference ranking algorithm. And the modern continuous version of your idea is liquid democracy, or delegative democracy, associated with Brian Ford's work in the early 2000s. their delegation is ongoing rather than a one-time election. You can hand your vote to an individual. Okay. You can hand your vote to an individual. That person's weight reflects everyone who delegated to them. And crucially, you can pull it back at any time. Oh, interesting. Or they can redelegate it onwards. It's your weighted individual idea turned into a live revocatable system rather than a fixed 4-year term. So that is interesting. Like, to remove terms entirely from a democracy and allow a person to vote for an individual, and you can change that vote at any time. And so they're like a leader's power or someone's power in the system would go up and down based on their like approval rating, essentially. And so if somebody does something in Congress that you don't like, that you could very directly, very immediately lose power within the legislature. I mean, like a system where people were more involved in politics, this would be like, it would be a better system to use this. But people, like, this would require people to be involved in politics continuously, and I don't think that is reasonable for an average individual. Like, I don't, the 4-year vote, I'd argue, like, I personally want to see like a 3-year system where on a specific day every year you would vote for your federal, your provincial, and your municipal, and you would rotate through those 3, and you'd have that vote on the same day. Make it a holiday every year, and so you'd have something to vote on at that same day every year, and you'd rotate through those 3 systems. But active, like, I see the appeal. I don't see it working in modern society. So what? Okay, let's continue. What would your system actually look like in practice? Picture this: a legislator with, say, a cap of 200 seats. I mean, you don't cap seats, you cap how many votes you need to get a seat. On election day, everyone votes for one named human, no party. Okay. What is... What is the system where you get to vote and you get to choose multiple candidates, and it's the first candidate that passes a certain number of votes where your vote actually counts? What's that system called? I know there's a specific name for it. The genuine interesting consequences. Okay, the concept of a safe seat or malapportment disappears because there are no distinct boundaries to draw. Weight just follows people. A wildly popular independent could enter with enormous personal weight and no party machines behind them. Conversely, a backroom party fixer with no actual voter would choose has no path in because there's no list to be slotted onto. But the problems are real and worth naming honestly. Parties have a way of reconstructing the whole system designed to remove parties. Parties have a way of reconstituting themselves, even when you ban them. Coordination is useful. reconstituting. Like that's the downside, right?
Reconstituting
themselves. That's just like remaking, right? Be fine. To reconstruct, reorganize, or return something to a former state. Let's see if I find that name. Ranked choice voting, right there. I like that. So the whole idea would be that you use ranked choice voting, and the first individual you vote for that passes the threshold that you set is where your vote would count. But the problems are real and worth naming honestly. Parties have a way of reconstituting themselves even when you ban them. Coordination is useful, so you'd likely see informal blocks of de facto whips emerge, just without legal status. Committees work awkward. Committees work awkward. A member carrying 5% of the chamber's the whole committee system, huh? A member carrying 5% of the chamber's total power can't physically sit on every committee. So how do you handle their weight when they're absent from a subcommittee's vote? There's vote buying and pressure risk in the asset vote transfer stage, since these negotiations are exactly where deals get cut out of public view. I mean, is that a good thing? And Wade voting can produce a single individual with, like, couldn't we just create a system where committees are handled independently and they are brought before your legislative body? Like committees do work on things to get stuff to pass, and committees would have to bring, like, do the work they do and then bring it to the legislative body. There would be their vote on it. You'd get your final tally. There would be a discussion period. The committee would have to go back, rediscuss the topic, because if it doesn't, if it passes, it becomes law. But assuming it doesn't pass, they would then have to take the input from the legislative body, redo the committee work, bring it back, and have another vote. And you would repeat the cycle until whatever job the committee was assigned to do, whatever law they were trying to pass, would be passed or eventually folded because they couldn't get the votes for it. In this way, you essentially you're taking the committee work out of the legislation into a third party, but the legislation is the one voting, and the committee is designed to get whatever it is whatever law they're trying to debate. They're designed to get that passed and to make the changes necessary to get it passed. And if you have proper representation within the legislative body, the final version is going to look, it's going to be like the most representative version of it, right? Okay. And weighted votes can produce a single individual with enormous personal weight to be near decisive, which is a concentration of power that single member systems specifically avoid. There's also a transparent cost. Voters can follow, my party got 30%, so it has 30% of seats, more intuitively than my vote was transferred by my candidate to a third person I didn't pick. That's fixed with ranked choice voting. The honest summary is what you're reaching for exists as a coherent design and has been worked out in some detail. It's just never been adopted at a national scale, partly because the transfer/coalition step is where the practical and political difficulties concentrate. Asset voting is probably the closest thing to a complete worked out version of your specific intuition. What was asset voting again? You vote for one individual that becomes the holder of those votes, their assets. The candidate and candidates below the threshold to hold a seat can donate or negotiate their accumulated votes. So I'm thinking something similar to asset voting, but with a ranked choice voting system where there is a specific threshold set in order to keep the legislator at a reasonable number. But the ranked choice system where am I? Something similar to asset voting, but with a ranked choice voting system where that threshold set in order to keep the legislator at a reasonable number. Is there a system like this set up? Or like laid out. I also want to talk about like offboarding committee work, but let's see what it finds here. I wanted to save you two sources. I'm going to save you two sources. My sources are starting to get too long. I might need to put folders within folders. Ooh. Now we're organizing. Let me check whether a specific hybrid. What you've landed on is a real incoherent design. And the good news is it is the hard part is mostly solved. But it doesn't have a single famous name, and as far as I can find, it's never been adopted. Okay. It lives in the academic and reform theory world as a hybrid of pieces that each coexists separately. Let me describe exactly what you've specified and flagged the one design decision that makes or breaks it. Okay, here we go. Your system is essentially rank individual candidates, use a quota threshold to decide who's big enough to sit, eliminate everyone below the threshold, and transfer the votes up the ranking. Seat the survivors, each carrying weighted floor power equal to votes they ended up holding. Very, very good description of what I was trying to say. If anything, it's organized it better. That's asset votes with a candidate negotiation step replaced by a ranked ballot. Your ranking is the pre-committed infrastructure for where your vote flows if your top choice can't make it. Combined with weighted voting on the floor, the asset voting literature explicitly contemplates this weighted power version. One well-known variant weights each elected member by the exact assets they hold rather than giving everyone equal power. Yeah. Vote for a person, not a party. Here's the crucial fork in the road, and it's the thing your design has to get right. Standard single transferable vote / proportional ranked choice voting does something that would quietly destroy your whole concept. surplus redistribution. In ordinary single transferable vote, when a candidate exceeds the quota, the excess votes above the threshold get transferred away to other candidates. A candidate 200 votes over the threshold has that surplus transferred out, so they end up sitting right at the threshold but not above it. The entire point of that step is to make every winner end up holding exactly one quota, i.e. equal weight. If you ran your system with the normal, well, I mean, I'm moving away from the single transferable vote system at this point. So if you ran your system with the normal, every legislator would come out essentially equal, and not so. Okay, so that is a misunderstanding. So your system must do the opposite: elimination from the bottom, but never redistribute from the top. Yes, exactly. So below threshold candidates knocked out and their votes flow upward via the ranking. Pure instant runoff mechanisms on the elimination side. But a candidate who clears the threshold keeps every vote they hold and walk into the chamber carrying all of it as weight. The threshold isn't a target everyone converges to, it's just a floor for administration that keeps the chamber from filling with thousands of trivially weighted numbers. That asymmetry, so exactly. And the whole ranked choice voting ensures your vote goes to someone who will have a seat and have a weight. That asymmetry transfers the losers, freezes the winners. Yeah. It's the precise thing that distinguishes your idea from single transfer vote. Yeah. And it's why it produces unequal legislative weights where STV produces equal ones. Mechanically, it would look like this. Say you set the chamber to a workable size by picking a threshold. For instance, 0.5% of national vote earns a seat, capping you at roughly 200 members. Everyone ranks capping you at 200 members. You're going to have far less than that. Like, you'll always have popular candidates. You'll always have your Donald Trumps that'll swing a lot of votes. So I imagine you probably only have like 40 or 50 members. Everyone ranks individual humans, no parties. You run elimination rounds, lowest candidate drops. Their ballots move to each voter's next ranked surviving choice repeat. Yeah. You stop eliminating once remaining candidate is above the 0.5 threshold. Those survivors are your legislature. A wildly popular independent might enter holding 4% of the national vote and therefore wield 8 times the floor power of a member who scrapped in at 0.5%. On any bill, you sum weights rather than count hands. Yes. A couple of honest wrinkles worth knowing. Good. I like wrinkles. Since you're clearly designing this seriously, I mean, I don't know about that. First, there's a tension between cap the chamber size and no wasted vote. With a hard threshold, the votes of people who enter ranking consistent of tiny candidates who all got eliminated can still end up exhausted. Okay, let me read that again. With a hard threshold, okay, the votes of people who enter ranking and whose entire ranking consisted of tiny candidates. I mean, I imagine like you'll vote for a tiny candidate and then you'll eventually just vote for one of the big candidates that you know is going to make it. And so you won't have too many people that are like, oh, this is like, okay, let's continue. Entire ranking consisted of tiny candidates who all got eliminated can still end up exhausted. The threshold is doing exactly the job you want, keeping numbers sane, but it reintroduces a little of the wasted vote problem that pure asset voting avoids by letting candidates renegotiate. Like a little bit of wasted vote problem. If it's ranked choice voting, like your vote is still going to the individual you choose. They just might not be your first choice. There's recent academic work specifically on smarter ways to reallocate those threshold wasted votes using single transferable vote style and other rules, which is close to the corner of your design space you're poking at. Second, weighted floor voting raises practical governance questions. Single transferable vote sidesteps how committees work when members carry unequal weight. The risk of one individual accumulating near decisive personal weight. Okay. I don't understand its grievances. Like the threshold is doing exactly the job you want, keeping numbers same, but reintroducing a little of the waste vote problem. I don't see that. Like I don't see it. You're still, it might not be your first candidate, but you're still getting your vote through. There's no waste. There's recent academic works specifying on smarter ways to reallocate those threshold. I don't see it as waste at all. Okay. I note your criticism, but I do not care. But to directly answer your question, no, I'm not aware of any jurisdiction or name package system that implements exactly this ranked ballot. Admission threshold, no surplus redistribution, weight floors vote. The components are all established: asset voting, weight voting, quota voting. Specific assembly you've described is the kind of thing that shows up in voting theory discussion and proposals. Well, I mean, that's essentially what we're doing right here. We're doing voting theory discussion and proposals rather than any adopted legislative law. I'm not sure full working. Okay, so I need a name for the system so that we can continue talking about it. Right? This is the system. What good name going forward? Just so that we can refer to it. Just so that we can refer to it as a name rather than like whatever. If you don't have a name, you can't talk about it, right? Well, it's thinking there. What percentage of an MP's time is taken up by committees? Because the committee thing is, you can't, the whole system, there's no way you could do it with a committee. Because committees, like you have just how they're set up, it doesn't lead into this. You would need an independent committee system for this idea. Okay, the main reason there's no tidy figure, whether an MP, but 21% of MP form part of that payroll. So, okay, that's not. 21 meetings, averaged about 2 hours, 36 minutes each. Committee work is reoccurring weekly committee measured in hours, not the bulk of a full schedule. Committee works possibly somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% of their parliamentary time during sitting weeks. So it's not that much. 10 to 20% of parliamentary time. Good naming for the voting system has 2 jobs at once. Okay, let's just look at ideas. Weighted transferable vote. We're not transferring anything, so I don't want to do that. I mean, it sits one word away from single transferable vote. So anyone who knows single transferable vote immediately understands the ballot and transfer mechanisms. I kind of want to get away from the single transferable vote, though, because that was not the system we're using. If anything, relating to that could confuse people. Mandate voting or weighted mandate. Okay. Ranked asset voting. Lineage name, your system genuinely descends from asset voting with the ranked ballot replacing the kin. Ranked asset voting. Okay. Okay. Where's the system I'm looking for? Individual candidates use quotation threshold to decide who's big enough to sit, eliminate everyone below threshold, and transfer their votes up the ranking. Give me a second. Rank asset voting equals that. Yeah, I'm just playing with an idea. So the biggest issue I see with a system like this is the committee aspect of government. Now, what if we were to create like a third party independent group that essentially did committee work and then brought their results to the legislature for a final vote? Could this fix the committee issue? What other issues is this system likely to run into? Now I'm going to separate these and we'll see what happens. Can I go max for this one? Let's see what it gets. I'm way off topic, aren't I? I guess not. This is the topic. This is what I'm talking about. I guess I could change its name to ranked asset voting. Let me update that. Well, it thinks we update. This is a good time. This is a good time to do this. All right, I'm going to need to move on here in a little bit. This will probably be my last one. What to get into next? I mean, like, gerrymandering isn't really a thing in Canada. I don't know if I want to talk about that. Maybe I'll do a quick one about gerrymander. I want to find some quick ones to. So like, it's highlighted this. Does that? Oh, that's me. I wanna. Is there like a memory thing? Do I gotta create a project or something like that? Ranked asset voting. A new CPU boost feature. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, here's the thing. Here's, I mean, like, I dislike it when it says stuff like this because it's almost like you're not getting a neutral response. To a degree, AI is like social media in that it wants to keep your attention on it, and so it kind of feeds into kind of like a yes man, right? And if you've seen any government, like look at the Russian government or even the U.S. current government, yes men don't lead to good results. Surrounding yourself with yes men is how you get bogged down in a war in Ukraine for what are we at, like 4 years now? Like, and so I don't like it when it does that. And it's worth knowing that what you're proposing has an almost exact real world precedent. Well, that's what I want. Which is the best evidence that it can work and the best illustration of why it's used so sparingly. Okay. The precedent is the base closure model of the US. Uses BRAC. An independent commission does all the detailed political fraught work, studying which military bases to close, and produces a finished package that the legislator can vote up or down with no amendments. It was deliberately built to solve a collective action paralysis. Okay, so we're talking about my idea, not the model as a whole. Like we're just talking about the update, right? No legislator will ever vote to close a base in their own district. Yes, like you have that issue, and it solves it precisely by removing the legislators from the deliberative work and handing them a take it or leave it result. So your intuition pulled the committee function out into an independent body, let the weighted chamber just ratify, is a real institutional pattern, not a novelty. So this is already done in the US for base closures because they couldn't like no one would decide to close a base in their own district, so you had to remove that. And mechanically it does fix your problem cleanly. The reason committees break under ranked asset voting is that a member holding 4% of the chamber physically can't sit on every committee, so their enormous weight is absent from most committee rooms. And the idea is that if you hold 4% of the weight, like you get funding based off your voting weight, right? And so with additional funding, you could have people that go more deeply into like how the committee is doing stuff, and like you would have more resources to make a better decision at the same time. As the committee worked happens in a separate body, that problem evaporates because the weighted legislator only needs to assemble for the one event, the final floor vote, where everyone weight is actually present. But notice that you've traded for it. Notice what you've traded for. Because this is the crux, you've moved an enormous amount of real power to a body nobody voted for. I mean, in the end, the legislature is what decides what's law. And if you cannot bring a proposal to the legislator, they accept. But I get it, the body has wording and. In any legislator, the committee function isn't just clerical, it's drafting, agenda setting, and the power to not advance something. Whoever controls what reaches the floor and in what form controls a huge share of the outcome. Okay. An up or down vote on a finished bill is far weaker than line by line amendment power, so your weighted legislator risks becoming a rubber stamp with the real governing happening in an unelected body. That's an issue. that is a problem. Which somewhat defeats the point of so carefully measuring each representative's mandate. And there's a second problem hiding in who staffs this body. If the legislator appoints it, the chamber coalition dynamic flows into the appointment. If it's a permanent expert corpse, you've created a technocracy. Either way, this is the most likely door through which your banned parties walk back in. Coordinating to control committee appointments is exactly the kind of durable alliance that is a party in everything but name. Okay. So the committee function, drafting, agenda setting, the power to not. Whoever controls what reaches the floor and in what form controls a huge share of the outcome. This is an issue we have to solve. And you can't have everyone on every committee, right? And so that's where parties come in the first place. And so we got to solve that if you want to get rid of the party system. Okay, there's a cleaner fix that keeps accountability inside. Maybe it'll just give me an idea. There's a cleaner fix that keeps accountability inside the elected chamber, and it's worth considering as an alternative. Keep committees staffed by your elected legislators, but strip the deciding out of them and leave only the deliberating. Committees investigate, hold hearings and drafts, but they hold no binding votes and no gatekeeping power. Every binding decision, including which bills advance at all, happen on the weighted floor. The committee problem under rank, that was the one I came up with, right? Rank asset voting. Yes. The committee problem under rank asset voting is really only a problem when committees vote with weight or can kill bills. If committees are purely advisory and all the weight-bearing decisions live on the floor, then a heavy weight who isn't on the agricultural committee still casts their full 4% on the agricultural bill. Committee members shape proposals but no longer distort outcomes. The cost is floor congestion, but weighted floor voting is fast. You're summing numbers, not wrangling hundreds of bodies through specialized work. So it's tolerable. This keeps the people doing the work elected and accountable, which the independent body version sacrifices. So it's saying to just, like, I'll be honest, I don't understand committees that well in their current form. So it's saying strip the deciding out of them and leave only the deliberating. So in this case, the people you elect would still be the ones creating the laws. But committees would have less deciding power, and they would only be shaping the laws. Committees shape the laws, but don't have deciding powers. It got all the punctuation wrong. I know you can't see, but it got it all. Committees shape the laws, but don't have deciding powers. Okay. Reasonable. I mean, like, the issue is at the same time, this is going to lead to so many more votes. I guess if you have the committee still making the laws. Okay. As for the other problem, the system as a whole will hit a few more serious than the committee question. Oh gosh, I thought the committee question was the worst of it. The deepest one is that voting power is not the same as voting weight. Okay, what do you mean? Voting power is not the same as voting weight. And this undermines your core design premise. You built the system so that a representative's weight equals exactly the citizens behind them, perfectly proportional. But in any weighted voting body, a member's actual influence, how often their vote is pivotal to the outcome, is notoriously non-proportional to their weight. A member with a large block can sometimes be mathematically decisive, far beyond their share, and a small member can be a dummy with literally zero power despite holding real votes. Well, this is all like you have to work with other people to get stuff passed, right? Like-minded people will lean the same way. And so if you're voting for someone like-minded, okay, let's continue before I get into it. Or conversely, a kingmaker far beyond their size. Okay. So the clean proportionality you designed at the ballot box gets scrambled the moment coalitions form on the floor. This is studied formally. Look up the Benzin and Shapley-Sherbick power indexes. So this is the whole parties just have a habit of reforming themselves. Working with others is beneficial. And so even if you design a system that tries to remove parties, you're going to end up with parties. Voting power is not the same as voting weight. And it's the kind of thing that, okay, where was I? This is studied, and it's the kind of thing that's invisible until the system is running and someone realizes a 9% member effectively runs the chamber. Close behind, concentration of power in a single individual. If a charismatic national figure pulls 15% of the vote, you've created a near veto player with no party to constrain them and no district to answer to. Exactly the concentration that equal weight systems exist to prevent. And the flip operational side, the heavyweight failure problem. If a member holds 5%, if a member holding 5% dies, falls ill, or simply stays home, that 5% of the chamber's decision-making capacity gone in one stroke. Vastly more disruptive than losing one of many equal members. You'll need a worked out answer for what happens to those votes. Redistribution, a proxy, a by-election, and every option has costs. Then there are two that hit your no parties goal and you in your own situation perfectly. Coordination reconstructs parties, whether you ban them or not. You simply cannot pass laws without stable voting blocks. So de facto parties will form. You simply cannot pass laws without stable voting blocks. So de facto parties will form, possibly less transparent than the real thing, and the loss of local representation, with no districts and weight pooling onto nationally famous candidates. Rural area like where you are could end up with no one who specifically answers to it. District systems guarantee every place a representative, and this guarantees none. Related is the vote cognitive load problem. Party labels exist partly as shortcuts, and asking voters to rank individuals out of proportionally vast national fields with no party heuristics is genuinely demanding, which tends to advantage celebrities and the already famous. None of these is essentially fatal, but the vote power paradox and the single dominant individual risks are the two I'd want airtight answers before anything else, because they strike at the proportionality that the whole reason the system exists. Okay, so a lot of problems in the system. Probably a reason it isn't used anywhere, right? Well, it was an idea to try and get like, the idea is to give more voices, well, a voice, right? Give more people a voice in the democratic system, and then give weight to that voice based off the population. But I think it hits at something core when it says you simply cannot pass laws without stable voting blocks. And therefore, voting blocks will always exist. Trying to remove them likely will not end well for a democracy.